You have been lied to by your own senses. From the moment you opened your eyes, you began to build a mental model of how the world works. You watched a ball roll across the grass. You saw a stone fall into a lake. From these experiences, you derived a law that feels as fundamental as breathing. Things move in straight lines. They follow paths. They exist in specific places at specific times. This is the Newtonian dream. It is the comforting vision of a clockwork universe, in this version of reality. If you throw a pebble, its trajectory is a solved equation. It occupies a sequence of points in space, one after another, governed by forces that act like invisible rails. You believe that if you could just zoom in far enough past the dust, past the cells, down to the atoms, you would find the same mechanical certainty. You imagine tiny billiard balls knocking into each other with perfect, predictable precision. This is not just an oversimplification. It is a total fabrication. The idea of a path is a human invention designed to make sense of a reality that is far more chaotic and alien than you are willing to admit. We use the word path because our brains cannot process the alternative. We see a bird fly from a tree to a fence, and we assume it took the shortest distance between those two points. We assume it was a single object moving through a single set of coordinates. But nature does not recognize your coordinates. Nature does not care about your shortest distance. At the smallest scales, the rails disappear. When you look at an electron, you are looking at a point-like object following a trail. You are looking at a smear of possibilities. The billiard ball model fails because there is no ball and there is no table. There is only a calculation. If you find this frustrating, it's because you are trying to impose common sense on a system that predates the evolution of the human mind. Common sense is an adaptation for survival on the African savanna. It was never meant to understand the texture of the vacuum. We think of probability as a tool we use when we are ignorant. We say there is a 50% chance of a coin flip because we don't know the exact force of the thumb or the air resistance in the room. We assume that if we had all the data, the probability would vanish, replaced by 100% certainty. In the real universe, the data doesn't exist. The uncertainty isn't in your head, it is in the fabric of space itself. Probability is not a lack of information. It is the only information available. The machine you think you live in is a mirage. The clockwork is broken, and as we move deeper, you will find that the path you thought was so solid is actually the most fragile thing in existence. To understand how reality actually moves, we have to look at the work of Richard Feynman. He looked at the simple act of a particle moving from point to point B and realized that our intuition wasn't just slightly off, it was diametrically opposed to the truth. In your world, if you walk from your front door to your car, you take one path. You might take the sidewalk, or you might cut across the grass, but at any given moment, you are on a single trajectory. This seems self-evident. It is the least action principle of the macroscopic world. But Feynman suggested something that sounds like the fever dream of a madman. He proposed that a particle does not take one path, it takes every path. When an electron travels from a source to a detector, it doesn't just travel in a straight line. It also travels in a curve. It travels in a loop. It travels to the edge of the galaxy and back. It travels through the heart of a distant star. It takes every conceivable route, at every conceivable speed, all at the same time. This isn't a metaphor. It isn't a mathematical trick to get the right answer. The math of the universe explicitly requires that every one of these infinite possibilities be accounted for. If you ignore even the most absurd, convoluted path, the one where the particle zigzags across the room a billion times before reaching its destination, your prediction of where the particle will land will be wrong. This is the path integral. It suggests that the history of any object is not a single thread, but a vast, tangled web of maybes. You might ask, if the electron is taking every path, why don't I see it everywhere? The answer is that you are looking for an object, but the universe is dealing in amplitudes. Each of these infinite paths has a specific value associated with it, a weight. In Feynman's view, the reality we observe is the result of all these different paths interfering with one another. Think of it like noise. Some paths sound like a certain note, while others sound like the exact opposite. When they meet, they cancel each other out into silence. Most of the absurd paths, the ones where the electron flies to the moon and back, cancel each other out almost perfectly. They disappear into the static of the impossible. What we perceive as a straight line or a classical path is simply the place where the most paths happen to add up instead of subtracting. It is the loudest part of the symphony, but don't let that bring you back to your comfort zone. The fact remains, before you looked, the particle was doing everything. It was everywhere. It was exploring the total geometry of the universe just to move a millimeter. Your sense of place is a lie. You are not a traveler on a road. You are the byproduct of an infinite number of ghosts, all competing to be heard, until only one remains. If the universe is taking every path, we are forced to ask, what exactly is traveling in your everyday life? You use numbers to describe reality. You say a car is moving at 60 miles per hour, or a room is 20 degrees. These are scalars, simple, one-dimensional values. But the universe does not speak in simple numbers. To describe the weight of a path, Feynman realized we have to use something called a probability amplitude. Stop thinking of probability as a percentage. Forget the idea of a 20% chance of rain. Instead, imagine a tiny clock face attached to every possible path an electron could take. As the particle moves along a path, the hand of that clock spins. When the paths reach their destination, we don't just add them up like apples in a basket. We add them like arrows. If one path arrives with its arrow pointing up, and another arrives with its arrow pointing down, they sum to zero. They vanish. This is destructive interference. The event simply does not happen. This is the geometry of maybe. The reason the world feels solid and reliable is not that things are there, but because the arrows for the wrong places are all pointing in different directions, canceling each other out into nothingness. This is deeply unsettling. It means that the physical world is built out of things that have no physical substance. A probability amplitude is a complex number, a mathematical abstraction that exists in a space we cannot see or touch. It has a phase, the direction of the arrow, and a magnitude, the length of the arrow. You think you are looking at matter. In reality, you are looking at the sum of an infinite number of spinning arrows. When the arrows align, when they all point in the same direction, the probability spikes. The maybe becomes a most likely. This is constructive interference. This is the only reason you can sit in a chair without falling through the floor. The trillions of atoms in the chair and the trillions of atoms in your body are all engaging in a massive, coordinated dance of phase alignment. You are a standing wave of probability. There is no stuff inside the atom. There is no solid core. There is only this shivering geometry. If the phases of your constituent paths were to shift by just a fraction, you would cease to be a solid object and become a cloud of possibilities drifting into the walls. The universe isn't made of things. It's made of the rules that govern how these arrows spin and combine. We are the survivors of a mathematical slaughter, where trillions of potential versions of us were cancelled out by the interference of the vacuum, leaving only the version that appears for a brief moment to be real. If everything is a ghost, why does the wall feel hard? Why doesn't the coffee cup pass through the table? If the universe is a chaotic sum of infinite, absurd paths, why does it look so boring? The answer lies in the scale of the clocks. The hands of the probability arrows spin at a rate determined by the energy and mass of the object. For an electron, the clock spins relatively slowly, allowing its arrow to stay pointing in a similar direction over a measurable distance. This is why small things act weird. Their waves are long enough to overlap, to interfere, to be in two places at once. But you are not an electron. You are a massive, lumbering collection of $1,027 particles. When an object has mass, real macroscopic mass, the clock hands spin with a violence that is difficult to comprehend. They rotate trillions upon trillions of times for every millimeter of travel. Because the spin is so fast, even the tiniest deviation from the straightest path causes the arrow to flip 180 degrees. Imagine a billion people holding arrows. If they all walk in a perfectly straight line, their arrows might stay aligned. But if one person takes a single step that is a fraction of a millimeter too long, their arrow is now pointing the wrong way. In a large system, every path that isn't the path of least action is met by a nearly identical path that is slightly out of phase. They kill each other. Image showing the cancellation of paths for a macroscopic object, leaving only the central classical trajectory. This is the classical limit. The solidity you feel is actually a graveyard of cancelled possibilities. The table feels solid because the probability of its atoms being anywhere else has been annihilated by destructive interference. The randomness of the universe is still there, but it is buried under the sheer weight of numbers. You think you see a solid world, but you are actually seeing a very narrow, Very specific statistical fluke. This is what Feynman's math revealed. The laws of physics as you know them, Newton's laws, the laws of motion, gravity are not actually laws. They are just the average. They are what happens when you have so many spinning arrows that only the most boring, predictable result survives the cancellation. We live in the large number shadow. We are like people looking at a blurred photograph of a crowd and thinking. We see a single, solid shape. We don't see the individuals. We don't see the movement. We only see the stillness of the sum. Reality isn't solid. It's just quiet because the contradictions have silenced each other. But don't mistake that silence for stability. The underlying chaos hasn't gone anywhere. It's waiting just beneath the surface. And it only takes a change in perspective to realize that the ground beneath your feet is an accidental agreement between trillions of ghosts. If the universe is a soup of overlapping possibilities, why do we ever see a single result? Why, when you look at the moon, is it always in the same place? This brings us to the most uncomfortable realization in modern physics, the collapse. In the language of Feynman, the universe remains a sum of all paths only as long as it is left alone. The moment an event is recorded, the moment a particle hits a screen, or a photon bounces off a surface, the interference stops. The maybe is forced to become a fact. We often call this observation, but that word is a trap. It makes you think of a human being with a clipboard, or a conscious mind peering through a lens. This is a vanity. The universe does not require a witness to function. In physics, an observation is simply any interaction that leaves a permanent mark on the rest of the world. Think of it as decoherence. When a quantum system is shivering, delicate set of spinning arrows bumps into the environment, it gets entangled. The air molecules, the stray photons, the dust, they all start carrying a piece of that particle's information. The clocks lose their synchronization. The perfect mathematical silence of interference is shattered by the noise of the outside world. The universe is constantly looking at itself. Every time an atom hits another atom, a choice is made. Reality is being stitched together, second by second, by a trillion tiny collisions. But here is the horror. We have no mechanism that explains how the universe chooses. Feynman's math tells us exactly what the odds are, but it remains silent. On the moment of the pick, why this path and not that one? Why did the electron land on the left side of the detector instead of the right when both paths were equally valid? There is a profound, structural hole in our understanding of the world. We can calculate the interference patterns with more precision than any other theory in human history, but we cannot tell you why now looks the way it does. You think you are an actor in a scripted play, but you are actually living in a story that is being written in real time by a series of random, inexplicable accidents. The tyranny is that once the universe makes a choice, the other paths, the other versions of you, the other outcomes are deleted. They become unreal. We are the thin, flickering line where the infinite maybe is crushed into a single, arbitrary is. Richard Feynman once said. I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics, coming from the man who mapped its inner workings. This wasn't modesty, it was a warning. It was the admission of a burden that every physicist since has had to carry. We have found the ultimate how, but the why has retreated into total darkness. For centuries, the goal of science was to find the underlying logic of the world. We assumed that if we looked deep enough, we would find a set of gears, a reason why things happen. But Feynman's quantum electrodynamics QED offers no such comfort. It is a theory of shut up and calculate. The math works. In fact, it works better than any theory in the history of human thought. We can use these spinning arrows to predict the magnetic moment of an electron to 10 decimal places. It is like predicting the distance between New York and Los Angeles to within the width of a human hair. The accuracy is staggering. It is the crowning achievement of our species. And yet, it describes a reality that is fundamentally insane. If you ask the theory, what is a particle doing when we aren't looking? The theory answers, it is doing everything at once. If you ask, how does it decide where to land? The theory answers, it doesn't, it just happens. There is a hollow core to our brilliance. We have mastered the art of predicting the behavior of the ghosts, but we have no idea why the ghosts exist in the first place. We are like people who have learned to perfectly predict the movements of shadows on a wall, without ever being able to turn around and see the fire that casts them. Feynman's burden was the realization that the universe is not a puzzle to be solved, A puzzle implies a logical structure that fits together, but the path integral suggests a universe that is essentially a statistical riot. It suggests that at the very bottom of things, there is no reason, there is only a sum. This destroys the last vestige of human ego. We want to believe that we live in a rational world. We want to believe that cause and effect are sacred, but Feynman showed us that cause is just a high probability effect. The world is not a sequence of logical steps, it is a massive, ongoing calculation of amplitudes that we happen to be a part of. We are left with a terrifying precision. We have the most accurate map of reality ever created. But the map shows a territory that no human mind can truly inhabit. We can see the numbers, but we have lost the story. In the end, we are left standing on a precipice. The solid world you started with, the one of balls, and pots, and clockwork, is gone. It has been replaced by something far more haunting. If Feynman's math is the ultimate map of reality, then reality is not a place. It is a persistent, shimmering interference pattern. You are not a collection of objects. You are a symphony of cancellations. Every atom in your brain, every spark of your consciousness, is the result of an infinite number of wrong histories being silenced so that one right history can emerge. We are the survivors of a cosmic filtering process. We exist only because the math of the vacuum allowed our arrows to point in the same direction for a fraction of a second. This is the true architecture of the universe. It is not built of stone or light, but of the maybe. It is a structure of pure probability. A cathedral of chance where the walls are made of spinning clocks and the floor is a sum of ghosts. When you look at the stars, you are not seeing distant points of light. You are seeing the places where the path integrals of a trillion photons found a way to align with the atoms in your eye. You are seeing the outcome of a calculation that spanned light years and eons, only to resolve itself in the moment of your gaze. There is a cold, terrifying beauty in this. It means that the universe is not finished. It is not a static thing that happened once, billions of years ago. It is happening now. It is being recalculated in every femtosecond. In every corner of the void, the universe is a roll of the dice that is still in mid-air. It is easy to feel small in the face of this. It is easy to feel like an accident. But there is another way to see it. If the universe were a machine, you would be nothing more than a predetermined part of a pre-written script. But in Feynman's universe, the script is unwritten. The paths are all open. The impossible is not a wall. It is simply a place where the arrows haven't aligned yet. You are a witness to the most complex, beautiful, and improbable event in history. The fact that out of an infinite sea of chaos, something as coherent as a human being emerged to wonder why. Reality does not run on probability. Reality is probability, and you are the place where the math finally, briefly, becomes aware of itself.